Okay, we are in personality. All right, I'm trying to have my personality, but I was at the beach today and I got a lot of sun, so my face hurts. Okay, but I'm going to try to get through this. All right, so this is one of my favorite chapters because, of course, we're going to talk about Freud in this. Come on, let's boogie. All right, so what is your personality? This is your core set of your characteristics that influence how you think, how you act, how you feel, relatively consistent and enduring throughout your lifespan. And then your temperament are your distinct patterns of emotional reactions and your behaviors that are observed early in life. Your temperament remains pretty stable across your life and it is molded through your environment. All right, so nature nurture. This follows I believe this follows the vignette. Um, so what does it say? A study of 11 to 13-year-olds found that affiliative humor, the type that strengthens social bonds, can be reinforced by close friends. Research suggests that married couples tend to share similar styles of humor. Believe it or not, that is true. People may not think that, but it is true. This is why, in order for a marriage to successfully last, you need to marry somebody that has similar values as you, strengths as you, things like that. You definitely don't want to marry, or they say statistically, somebody that is very opposite of you, because just as opposites attract, also combust. So it's good to have similar styles of humor, etc. Okay, so when you look at the theoretical perspectives on personality and how each theorist or theory views it, you're going to have your psychoanalytic, behavioral, humanistic, social cognitive, biological, and trait. These are things that all encompass heavily on this chapter. So psychoanalysis is Freudian. Personality develops early in life. With behavioral, it's shaped through your interactions with your environment. Your humanistic approach looks at your innate qualities of your personality and how it's controlled in our destiny. Um, the social cognitive obviously looks at your social influences. The biological looks at your genetics and your physiological makeup. And then trait looks at your current traits, at your personality, and then predicts behaviors from that. So we're not going to go into the criticisms of that right now. All right, so this right here is little young Sigmund Freud and his father. So the psychoanalytic theories overview, childhood is the prime time for personality development, greatly influenced by processes of which we are unaware. So of course, Freudian theory looks at everything as being unaware, unconscious, through conflicts that you go through, and obviously sexual urges, because everything with Freud relates to sex. All right, so psychoanalysis is derived from the psychoanalytic theory. Very important to note that Freud's ideas were and still are controversial and lack scientific report. So you may ask, why do we still keep Freud around? Number one, he was a genius. And two, although there's a lot of, criticisms about Freud and how his, his approach did lack scientific, support. However, when we do look at many of the things that he kind of came up with, a lot of his critics said, you know what, Freud, that's really true, except just take the sex part out. So when you look at a lot of his theories, they do make sense, but the other stuff of his is a little bit wonky. So because there is no scientific support for it, that's what makes it controversial. But because his stuff was pretty darn accurate, a lot of it, not all of it, they keep it around. All right, so when you look at his theory of personality, you've got the conscious, the preconscious, and then your unconscious. So the conscious, of course, is everything that you're aware of, your thoughts, and your surrounding environment. Your preconscious are your mental activities that are outside of what is your current awareness, but something just with a little like just boop can bring that right into your attention. And then, of course, your unconscious is that level of consciousness that's completely out of your awareness, and you can't really access it without therapy. So these are those traumatic things, the things that you can't cognitively, not cognitively, consciously deal with. So it kind of gets pushed down and gets repressed. All right, so his structural model of the mind, that's three-part. You've got your id, your ego, and your superego. Your id, which is the primitive structure, is your very like selfish part of you, and that's guided by what's called the pleasure principle. Basically says, hey, if it feels good, do it. Um, your ego is kind of like the go-between of the id and the superego. So your id runs on the reality principle. So not the pleasure, but the reality. And that's the one that is able to plan for the future, solve problems, and make those decisions that are kind of like on the go. And then you've got your super ego. That's your big moral center. That's the one that guides your behavior, the one that for following rules, laws, obeying your parents, obeying authority figures. So it's like your id and your super ego are kind of like opposite ends of the spectrum. And then your ego is kind of like your balancing. It's kind of like the conductor, if you will. All right, so if you look at, this is what's called the Freudian iceberg. So you've got the conscious level, that's everything that you're aware of. And ooh, let's go back. All right, so that's like peeking out saying, hey, I'm here. All right, so then you have your, oh, let me go back to that and let me pause that. Let me go, what? Let's go. Thing is freezing up. Okay. All right. So the ego, if you look at it, it's just right underneath, and that monitors the demands of the id and superego. Again, it's like the angel and the devil. So your id is the devil, your superego is the angel. And so then your ego is kind of like facilitating the go-between of those two. And then you've got your superego, and that internalizes all those rules, and that's your conscience. So that's the one that looks at everything, and that's like the moral center right here. And then your id is all the way down at the bottom. Again, that's the very selfish part. That's where all the impulses are and all of the illogical thinking. That's the one that says, hey, I want it when I want it, and I don't care about the consequences. Okay, so your ego defense mechanisms, again, this is all very Freudian. They distort your perceptions and memory of real world without our awareness to reduce the anxiety created by conflicts among the id, ego, and superego. So some of your ego defense mechanisms, the first one is projection. So this occurs when the expression of a thought or urge is so anxiety provoking that the ego makes us see it in someone else or accuse another of harboring these same urges. So when maybe you're upset or you're anxious about something and someone happens to be there and you project all of your anger or frustrations out onto that person that doesn't deserve it. So that is the first defense mechanism in Freud's theory of personality. Your repression, that's probably one of the most popular, and that's the way in which the ego moves uncomfortable thoughts, memories, or feelings away from the conscious. So basically, when something happens that is something that may be so horrific for your brain to, or for you to deal with, your brain is very malleable. The brain is very protective in nature. So what it does is it not literally, but it figuratively fractures, and then it gets all just kind of separates, and whatever the trauma was, it goes buried deep down inside, and it gets repressed, and it gets put away into the back of the mind until the brain is able to deal with it. And usually that is through very extensive psychoanalytic therapy. All right, so then you have Other ones, from more to less adaptive, you've got sublimation, identification, displacement, repression, rationalization, projection, denial. The one that you hear about a lot other than repression and projection is displacement, and that is when, let's say you're really angry at somebody, whether it's like your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your teacher, somebody, and you want to like punch them in the face, or maybe not because you're not violent. But displacement is when instead of like, you know, making a bad decision, you might like hit the wall. You hit something. So you're displacing your anger from the target you really want to onto something else that is going to a better outcome. Maybe you'll break your hand, but you won't go to jail or you won't get in trouble. All right, so you've got these forces. I'm physically attracted to my best friend's boyfriend. How dare I? I am wrong to feel those impulses. So it's like the id is feeling this. The ego is saying, how could you do that? That's your best friend. Your ego is the one that's feeling all this anxiety, and it's kind of balancing these two so that these don't go crazy. Again, devil, angel. All right. So we're not elaborating, moving on. All right, so this is where we get to Freud's wonky thinking. And this is where the psychosocial theorists look at Freud and say, whoa, all right, Freud, you're a little bit crazy. Because his psychosexual stages of development are what give his name a little bit like, dude, what were you thinking? All right, so according to Freud, humans pass through psychosexual stages of development from birth to adulthood, each of which has an erogenous zone as well as conflict that must be dealt with. All right, so you've got Erikson that has a psychosocial, you've got Piaget who has his cognitive, you've got Maslow, you've got Kohlberg, you've got all kinds of theorists with their stages of development. And then, of course, you've got Freud the perv, who's got oral, anal, phallic latency, and genital. All right, so oral happens very early, baby's crawling around, everything goes in the mouth. Anal is when, the child is toilet training. I'm going to go into more depth in this. Phallic is the weird stage, is what he based his study on of this little boy named Hans. This is that Oedipus complex stage where you want to be with mom and get rid of dad. And then latency period, this is adolescence where everything's kind of dormant. And then your genital stage is, late adolescence into adulthood. That's when it's okay now to kind of come back out and you're expressing your sexuality, etc. All right, so you look at the chart here, birth to about 1.5 years old. The erogenous zone is the mouth. The focus, child sucking, chewing, gumming, everything goes in the mouth. The conflict, if the parent or the caregiver doesn't give the child what the child needs, and during this time, it's weaning off of the breast, weaning off of the bottle, blah, blah, blah. Then later, okay, this child that grows up into an adult might be a smoker, a drinker, a nail biter, or an excessive talker. All right, then you move to the anal stage. That's 1.5 to about 3. Erogenous zone is the anus. The focus is eliminating bodily waste, controlling bodily functions, because this is when the child is starting to be able to control their bowel movements, and they are responsible for being able to get rid of this. And the conflict is toilet training. And of course, if they don't have a successful, progression through this, then when they become an adult, then what Freud says will happen as a result of this fixation is that the person might be rule-bound, stingy, chaotic, and destructive in their personality. And then during the phallic stage, this is about 3 to 6 years old, the erogenous zone is the genitals. The focus is on sexual feelings and awareness of oneself, because this is the time for exploring the body and knowing who the person is, and okay, this is what this is what feels good. And then the type of conflict is self-stimulation. Of course, the result of this fixation is promiscuity, flirtation, vanity, overdependence, and focus on masturbation, all according to Freud. The latency period is 6 years to puberty, kind of dormant, nothing really going on here, focusing on school and developing, especially socially and physically. And again, there's no focus because this focus is dormant. And then we pick it back up in the genital stage. This is at puberty and then beyond for the whole rest of your life. The erogenous zone is the genitals. This is a reawakening, a rebirth of sexuality. Focus on relationships now, into adulthood and stable relationships, marriage, family, all that kind of stuff. The conflict, of course, if this is not, taken care of in this stage, then sexuality and aggression, there's going to be that conflict. And then the result of that fixation is going to be inability to thrive in adult activities such as work and love. So it might be hard to stay into a relationship. It might be hard to maintain a job. All right, so oral stage of psychosexual development, again, begins at birth, lasts till about a year and a half. Erogenous zone is the mouth. Conflict is weaning. If you wean too early or late, this can have a long-term consequence on personality development. And then, of course, again, recap, smoking, nail biting, excessive talking, and increased alcohol consumption. All right, we went through the anal stage again. So you're too harsh in the anal stage if there is conflict. This might be, if you've ever heard of anal retentive personality, this is they're very rule bound, stingy. It's, it's my way. This is the way that it has to be. They don't very much deviate from their rules. And then, of course, the flip side of that is too lenient, and they call that anal expulsive, where that kind, rather than it being rule bound, it's just chaotic. There's no rules. It's all over the place and very destructive. All right, so this in here in the phallic stage where I was talking about Freud's study that he did with little Hans, the Oedipus complex is the attraction that a boy feels towards his mother, along with his resentment or envy to his father. So in this age, I know, sounds crazy, but they say that, hey, boy wants to get rid of dad because he wants to be with his mom. He wants to be with her, he wants to be in her bed with her, and he wants to have children with her. I know, sounds crazy. And then the Electra complex, that is for the girls. That's the attraction that a girl feels towards dad, and then jealousy that she feels towards mom. Now, of course, all this comes out in the wash, and everything is resolved, and then life goes on. But this is where it gets a little wonky. And the way that I like to explain it to my students, of course, this is during the Victorian era when we were looking at just heterosexuality. And so it's very normal that, a boy is going to, be close to his mom. So of course, when a boy is small, he may say, Mommy, I love you. You're so pretty. When I grow up, I want to marry you. That's normal because a boy doesn't understand. He just knows that his mother's the one that loves him, takes care of him. So that's why when boys, they grow up, they tend to model everything by their mother. That's why typically when a boy dates a girl, he's only going to bring home a girl that his mom is going to approve of, and vice versa. So Freud took it an extra step and got it all sexual and weird, but when you look at it in a psychosocial way, it makes more sense. He also said, coined this term, penis envy, and he said, hey, ladies, all you wish you had a penis. No, that's not reality. Well, maybe when you got to go to the bathroom and, guys can just go. But anyways, conflicts are successfully resolved through what's called identification. It's of the other parent, and then everything gets resolved. But fixation then can lead to that, what I said before, promiscuity, flirtation, vanity, overdependence, all that kind of stuff. Again, we talked about the latency period. That's kind of, you're just kind of figure out who you are, school, education, all that kind of stuff. And then genital is when you kind of kick it back up. And again, you're revisiting that and you're looking at relationships and becoming attracted to other partners. Usually the opposite sex parent or opposite, you start becoming attracted to partners who resemble the opposite sex parent, according to Freud. It doesn't mean, again, in reality, you want to be with mom or dad. It just means that you tend to value or respect your parent, so you want to put those qualities on the person that you're going to be with. And so Freud just took it a wonky way, but really, it's not how it really is. All right, so then you have your neo-Freudians that said, okay, dude, you are whack, but a little bit of what you said makes sense. So Adler said humans are not just pleasure seekers, but conscious and intentional in their behaviors. So he brought more to Freudian's theory. He says we are motivated by the need to feel superior. This drive originates in childhood. His theory of individual psychology focuses on each person's unique struggle with feelings of inferiority. And this is influenced in birth order. So Alfred Adler was, really looked at birth order, firstborn, middleborn, and then lastborn. Okay, how birth order may or may not affect your personality. Now, of course, a lot of this birth order stuff is a little less relevant today because of blended families and mixed families now. This was going back when we had traditional first, middle, and last. So when we look at that, you look at your firstborns, those are usually your highest achievers. They play by the rules, they excel at school, they're leaders because parents expect more from them because they are the firstborn. They're the ones that are going to model everything. Then you've got your middle children, they kind of get lost because after the last one comes in, the youngest, they're the ones that are, they're called the favorite child. They're, coddled by their parents, like they can do no wrong. They grow up, typically, they say, to be rebellious little kids and little troublemakers. And then you're, the first one, you go to everything because they're going to be like the president, the one that does everything. And then your last one, it's like, oh, I got to pay a lot of attention to them because they get in all this trouble. And then your middle one is kind of like, well, what about me? What happened to me? I'm here too. They're the ones that become really good mediators and they're very self-sufficient because they're the ones that always have to kind of fight for everything. So that's kind of like the way they look at that. Correlational research exists to support these relationships, but again, we always have to remember that correlation does not mean causation. All right, so then you have Carl Jung. That's Jung is how they say it. Another neo-Freudian looking at analytic psychology. He came up with the collective unconscious. These are your universal experiences of humankind that are passed from generation to generation, including memories and archetypes. So when you look at over here, this is very Jungian. And then you have, no, this isn't. That was on a different one. This is Karen Horney. So she's kind of like, yo, Freud, no, you don't have, or we don't have penis envy. You have womb envy. That was her claim to, no, I shouldn't say her claim to fame. That's what she said. So role of the child caregiver relationship is emphasized. People use three strategies: moving towards people, moving away from them, and then moving against people. All right, so his legacies. So recognize the importance of infancy and early childhood in the unfolding of personality. The self has depth that we should strive to know and understand. But his key criticisms, of course, the number one thing is that his theories lacked scientific validity. He overemphasized sexuality and unconscious in everything. His lack of attention to developmental issues that actually, go along with childhood, and his theory based on a biased, non-representative sample, which most studies and experiments and all that, there are samples that you can have these variables, you can compare. Freud, he was just kind of like, yo, this is my theory, and I'm right, and this is just the way it is. He was so cocky that I don't know, people just for some reason they really dug him. They either love him or hate him. All right, humanism is referred to as the third force in psychology when it comes to personality. Then you've got Abraham Maslow, again, all these theorists that are coming into play. And so he looks at like the creativity growth and healthy functioning of people, and not looking at a person's mental illness, but how we adapt mentally healthy. He looked at self-actualizers. That's kind of like almost at the top of the pyramid. And those are the people that continually grow to their fullest potential, whatever that potential may be. So you've got your humanistic theories, you've got the tendencies are your realistic perceptions, the acceptance of self, others, and nature, spontaneity and creativeness, independent and private, peak experiences, social interest and fellowship, and then autonomous and resistant to enculturation. And then you've got the characteristics of that, and then examples of each of these tendencies. I'm not going to read those. You can look at those on your own if you so choose. All right, then you have Carl Rogers. Oh, this was such a great show. He developed what is called client-centered therapy. He was considered the most beloved psychologist that ever lived because he saw that every single person had value and worth, which is not how, honestly, every psychologist or theorist believes. He believes that we all have this innate urge to move towards situations that are going to help us grow, and anything that's going to get us away from inhibiting our growth, importance of self-concept. And he thought that problems occur when we experience an incongruency between your own self-concept and your lived experiences. And then he said that our ideal self is the version of the self that we aspire to be. And then he believed in what is called an unconditional positive regard, that we treat people, all people, no matter what they have done, with this positive regard. No collaborative. All right, so key contributions. Perspective has led to a less negative and more balanced view of human nature. The field of positive psychology is drawn on this approach. So because of all of this humanistic theories came the explosion of positive psychology, which is amazing in therapy, but it doesn't work for all. The key criticisms, it is subjective. This should not discount the role of early experiences or negative life events, and constant praising can be counterproductive. So we don't want to over praise a situation, and we have to sometimes visit an early experience that caused trauma, because you can't just draw on positive psychology for all kind of therapeutic situations. And then when we look at the behavioral perspective, behaviorists view personality as a collection of behaviors which is shaped through learning. So this is observation. It has to be learned behavior. So key criticisms, behaviorism, it's too simplistic. There's no one size fits all. You can't just observe everything, because there are certain things that you cannot directly observe, things that are going on in your heart, things that cannot be seen by a clinician. May be able to see depression, anxiety through someone's eyes, but not everybody can see things that are just not directly observable. Assumes that humans are passive and unaware of what is going on in their internal and external environments. And then you've got the social learning perspective of personality. Julian Rotter, personality is the interaction between a person and his or her environment, hence social learning. Some aspects of personality cannot be directly observed. Locus of control, you've got an internal or an external locus of control. Albert Bandura was a huge theorist in social learning, actually probably number one theorist. Personality results from relationships and other environmental factors, and patterns of thinking. Cognitive is anything to do with thinking. Self-efficacy is the beliefs about our ability and effectiveness in reaching goals. Reciprocal determinism is multi-directional interactions among cognition, behaviors, and the environment. So it's taking all of those factors of thinking and then how you behave, and then encompassing the environment to make it all fit together. So key contributions in this perspective: among the first theories to recognize that people are not exclusive products of the environment, but dynamic agents capable of altering the environment. Several important cognitive aspects of personality proposed, like locus of control and expectancy. The focus on research and testable hypotheses, so being able to actually test these theories with independent, dependent variables to check for reliability and validity. But the key criticisms, importance of unconscious processes and emotional influences are ignored. So you can kind of see how all these theories of personality, this one lacks this, but it supports this. This one encompasses this, but it lacks this. That's why we need all of these different perspectives when we're working with people that are, going through life challenges, because there is no one size fits all. So psychology looks at the whole picture. Took a long time for us to get here, though. And then you've got the trait perspectives. I don't focus too much on this, but it's pretty interesting. And these are looking at the stable properties of personality. You've got the four theory, or there's three theorists here that Alport, Cattell, and Eysenck, that are the major ones in trait. And I'm going to go over them briefly. And then you have what's called the big fat personality. And you took a personality inventory. Right, so Alport looks at personal traits as the primary focus, temporary states, social evaluations, metaphorical and doubtful words. So basically, these trait theorists created this big list to operationalize all these terminologies. Cattell looks at surface traits and source traits. So when you look over here, they came up with the 16 personality factor questionnaire, and you look at, these are opposites. You've got reserved, outgoing, concrete thinker, abstract thinker. If you take this personality inventory, it's going to give you, it breaks down to what you are. And then Hans Eysenck proposed three dimensions of personality: introversion, extroversion, neuroticism, psychoticism. And so when you look at this wheel, if you're an unstable neurotic introvert, these are where you fall. If you're an unstable extrovert, you're over here. A stable introvert, this is where you want to be. If you're an introvert stable, you want to be here. If you're extrovert stable, you want to be here. So if you look at this unstable and you look at unsociable and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not sociable, so that means I'm unstable. No, what that means when you look at the unstable part, these are to the extreme. So to the extreme, to the extreme, ah. So unsociable is so unsociable. It's like, are you there? Very isolating. Reserved is like, so there's a difference between being a reserved person and then being so reserved that you don't speak. Pessimistic, it's not good to be pessimistic. So when you're too pessimistic, it's, oh, there's a cloud in the sky. Somebody that's an optimist will say, oh, it's a beautiful day, I'm going to go to the beach. A pessimist is going to say, I can't go to the beach because there's that one cloud in the sky. And when I go to the beach, that cloud is going to follow me and rain just on me. So we're looking at the extreme of that. Just like when you're looking at the unstable extrovert and you're looking at, okay, touchy. Well, I'm touchy. Let's say, not me, but, like, oh, I'm touchy. This is like touchy. It's like, oh, hi. It's not just like, oh, hey, whatever. This is, again, to the extreme. And when you look at this and you're like, optimistic, how is that unstable? Again, it's when optimistic is too extreme. Not everything is sunshine and roses. Sometimes when negative things happen, it's okay to feel like crap. It's okay to not be like, oh, it's a great day. It's okay. Tomorrow will be an even better day. It's going to be hopeful, but being unstable, that's not reality. So I hope I explained that to where you understand that these are just words, but understand when they're unstable, okay, that they're too much or too little. All right, the acronym of OCEAN. This is the big 5-factor model. So openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. So empirical support for this model has been established using cross-cultural testing, which is good. So when you look at this, you look at, okay, your openness, all these things that you meet, The left is obviously there's to the left, to the right, and then there's like a balance in the middle. So you're conforming or you're unconforming. You're uncreative or you're creative. You're practical or you're imaginative. Which one do you fall more, on? And so if you take the five-factor model of personality, you're going to get your data from this. Um, Again, conscientiousness, unreliable to reliable, lazy to ambitious, spontaneous to punctual, extroversion, loner to sociable, quiet to talkative, reserved to affectionate, agreeableness, rude to good natured, uncooperative to trusting, critical to helpful, neuroticism, calm to emotional, even tempered to temperamental, and then secure to worried. So which one would you fall under? Okay, we can skip on that. And we can skip on that. All right, so yeah, we don't need to worry about that. Across the world. No, we would be talking more about this in class. So these are things. Again, with trait theories, that's why I said I kind of skip over a lot of that. All right, so when you're looking at personality assessment, again, you're looking at, are they subjective or objective? Subjective is going to be a lot of your quantitative data where you can make judgments and opinions and you can interpret things. And then your objective data is going to come from more of your, wait, subjective. Oh, I said that flip. Subjective data is going to come more from your qualitative, where you're going to be getting, things, where people observe and they have biases, things like that. Objective, you're able to evaluate something. A lot of that is through quantitative data, very black and white numbers type of things. And then when you look at tests, you have to make sure, are they reliable and are they valid? Reliability is consistency. Can you take the same test and get the same results? So the Myers-Briggs test that I gave you guys, where you get the 4 letters, no matter when you take that, if you take it, last week and then you take it a month or a year from now, you should still always spit out those 4 letters. Your percentages may change, but you're not going to change from an extrovert to an introvert. You either are an extrovert or you are not. So a reliable test is going to be a consistent measure. And then a valid test is going to be, is that accurate? Am I measuring what I say that I am testing? So if I give you a psychology test and I put a bunch of math questions on there, that's not a very valid test because I'm measuring things that you have not learned in that class. So when you're looking at reliability, you have to have consistency and stability. And through that, you have test, retest reliability, making sure, again, you do it over and over again, get the same results. And then inter-rater reliability are when 2 people look at data and they agree on it most of the time. And then validity, again, is that accurate? All right, so assessments, you've got interviews. Interviews, you could do unstructured, semi-structured, and structured. Unstructured just kind of like goes with the flow, ask a question, and it becomes like a conversation. Semi-structured kind of starts off with something and then just determines whatever flow that goes in. And then structured is, the same, all different people are going to be asked the same question. It's very structured. Strengths, it allows the view of client in a natural, realistic setting, but the weaknesses, people may lie to give you a desirable response, misrepresenting, sharing distorted memories to the interviewer, and may be influenced by interviewer bias. So maybe the interviewer is biased to or for, for you or against you, depending on maybe something that was said in the assessment or interview. Your projective personality test, we've kind of gone away from some of these, but you've got the Rorschach ink blot test, which is those ink blots. I'm sure all of you have seen those. Again, there's a lot of weaknesses with those, and then the thematic apperception test, not something I talk about much. But with the Rorschach, it's a well-known projective test. developed by Rorschach, updated in 1970. You respond to these ink blots. There's no rhyme or reason, but you're looking at personality. So somebody that sees this ink blot, you might see butterflies, but somebody might see a very dark, disturbing, you know, picture, the devil, or just a burning something. And if they see these things, then this is where you look at disordered thinking. And then the TAT test assumes that the test taker will project underlying conflicts onto this ambiguous stimuli that's in these pictures, with the job of the test administrator being the one to kind of unearth them and bring about what's going on in their mind. All right, so these are the, this is the TAT test, and then this is the Rorschach inkblot test. All right, so strengths of them used by clinicians to provide a way to form a picture of the client, to kind of just build a basis. And this is, getting this multifaceted approach. But the weakness, it's very lengthy. Not only does it take a long time to administer, but it takes a long time to be able to get approved to do this testing. And then, of course, it's very subjective. All right. Social media behaviors can indicate a great deal about the personality traits of users. A lot of new data is coming out about social media and posting. Many narcissistic people flock to Instagram photo sharing platform where they can easily edit photos to promote themselves. Big thing to remember is this does not mean that everyone who posts selfies on Instagram are narcissistic. Now, let me tell you, I was at the beach today, hence my face feels like it's on fire. And I saw this girl drinking a White Claw, and I don't know, she must have drank that whole can in like 10 seconds, because she was lying on the beach and she was like taking a selfie of, getting that best picture. And I don't know, she must have taken that dang thing at least 15 times. And it was like, I couldn't help but staring at her like, girl, what are you? Is it gonna look any better like doing this, doing that? Doing that? I mean, it was crazy, but I was like, okay, don't look, mind your own business. But that's kind of like where all these new studies are coming from in social media and narcissism. Objective personality test. These are the ones that are more supported. The MMPI-2, the only one that's, administered or allowable in a court of law, 567 questions. It looks for a range of things. Use these for looking at disordered thinking, used in court cases, child custody battles, stuff like that. The 16 personality factor questionnaire, and then the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the one that you took, the one that you should have taken. All right, so the MMPI-2, most commonly used objective personality test, looking at disorders and abnormal behaviors, often used to inform decisions about custody, legal issues, and variety of non-clinical settings. It contains 10 clinical scales as well as validity scales. They're looking at lying behaviors. So like the first 100 questions and the last 100 questions, they're kind of the same questions, but said differently, asked differently. I want to skip that. This is just data on the 16 personality factor. All right, so strengths of using these often includes measures for checking validity. So they're usually very valid tests. But of course, the weaknesses, people may lie. Sociopaths are very good at faking these tests. Social desirability can influence the results. And the MBTI, though popular, has questionable validity. And that is that. All right, so I kept it under an hour. I wanted to. Thankfully, it was under 45 minutes. So now I am wrapping up personality, and we will talk more about that in class. So with that, you know what I like to say. Peace!